What if you could see the exact moment your soul leaves your body? Daniel never imagined he would live to tell such a story. A normal day turned into the most terrifying and revealing experience of his life. Not only did he feel the precise instant when his consciousness separated from his body, but he also saw with his own eyes what happens in that threshold between life and death, what lies beyond, who was waiting for him, and what secret did he discover in that moment. What Daniel experienced could change the way we understand death forever. Stay until the end, because this story is unlike any other. Death is not what we've been told. It's not an immediate tunnel of light or a dark void with no return. It's a moment, a specific instant, in which something inside you simply lets go. I don't know how to describe it in human words, but I'll try, because what I experienced when my soul left my body is something I never thought possible. I'm not a religious person. I never was. I always thought of life as what we can see, touch, and verify. When people spoke about the soul, I saw it as a lovely metaphor, something poetic yet unreal. However, at the exact moment when my heart stopped beating, I saw undeniable proof that we are not just flesh and bone. The most unsettling thing was that I witnessed the exact moment my soul separated from my body. It was as real as seeing your reflection in the mirror. Yet at the same time, it was the strangest and most overwhelming sensation I had ever experienced. I don't remember an accident. I don't remember an illness. The only thing I recall is being at home, sitting on my sofa, watching television, with my dog sleeping by my side. It was an ordinary day until I felt a sharp pain in my chest. It wasn't extreme pain, but enough to make me frown. I tried to get up, but my legs felt weak, as if the ground beneath my feet had stopped being solid, and in the blink of an eye, everything changed. I saw myself. I was there, sitting on the sofa, with my eyes half closed and my head tilted, as if I were about to fall asleep, but there was something that didn't make sense. I didn't feel tired. I felt nothing. I looked at my hands, but they weren't there. I touched my face, but I felt no skin. I didn't feel my body, but I could see, hear, and think with an otherworldly clarity. And it was then that I saw it. I saw what I never thought possible. From the center of my chest, an energy began to emanate, like a thread of liquid light floating in the air. It was as if my very essence was being extracted from the shell that I had always thought was me. That instant, that precise moment, was when I understood everything. I was no longer alive, and yet I had never felt more aware of my existence. My dog, who had been peacefully sleeping beside me just moments before, was now barking desperately, staring intently at me. He wasn't barking at my body, but at me, as if he could see me in this new form, as if he understood that something was wrong. I tried to call him, but my voice wouldn't come out. I tried to move, but there was no body to move. And at that moment, the air around me seemed to open up, like an invisible curtain tearing apart to reveal something beyond this reality. It was the beginning of a journey I had never imagined possible, and what I saw next made me realize that death is not the end. In the blink of an eye, the world I knew faded away. I was no longer in my home, not even in the reality I had always thought was unchanging. Suddenly, I found myself floating in a vast, infinite space, enveloped in a light so intense that it seemed to pulse with life of its own. It was not just a physical light. It was a light I felt within me, as if every fiber of my being was aligning with its energy. Jesus stood before me, with his imposing yet serene presence. His gaze radiated a love I had never experienced on earth, a love absolute, unconditional, and untethered. But what struck me the most was not his gaze. but what began to unfold around us. It was as if the very fabric of reality was opening before my eyes. In front of me, an image began to form that at first seemed like a mere reflection, but when I looked closer, I understood with a shiver that I was seeing my own life. It was not like remembering a blurry memory. It was much more real, more vivid than any memory. I saw my childhood, my adolescence, moments of happiness and moments of pain. Every decision I had made was there, reflected with overwhelming clarity. But the most shocking part was that I not only saw what I had lived. Every word I had said, every action, every gesture was connected to an effect. When I saw the day I shouted at my mother in a fit of anger, I felt her pain. Not only did I see her cry after I left home, I felt the sadness that consumed her, the helplessness of a mother who only wanted the best for her son. I witnessed the moment I ignored a friend who needed me. On earth, I had completely forgotten him, but in that instant, I felt the loneliness he experienced due to my indifference. Jesus was watching me with compassion, but he didn't say a word. He knew it wasn't necessary, because at that moment, I understood. There are no external judgments, no voice that condemns you. The real judgment is the one each soul faces when seeing the truth, without filters, without excuses. Judgment is feeling the impact of our actions on others, just as they felt it. And then I saw it, the exact moment when my soul left my body. The scene was both terrifying and fascinating. I saw my body on the couch, lifeless, while my dog barked desperately. I watched as my consciousness began to detach in small waves of light. But what surprised me the most was that I wasn't the only one seeing it. Around my body in the same room, there were other presences, beings made of light, but different from Jesus. They didn't speak, but moved as if they were guardians waiting for the exact moment too. We do not die alone, because there is always someone waiting for us. Those beings were there to guide me, to help me in the transition. But I hadn't seen them before, because my mind was still clinging to the idea of earthly life. Death is not a sudden end. It is a process where each of us must gradually let go of our physical identity, our attachments, our fear. Upon realizing this, I felt a wave of peace wash over me completely. Jesus extended his hand again, and in an instant, everything changed once more. I was no longer just seeing my life. I was now witnessing something much greater. It was as if I had been elevated to a higher level, where I could see the connection between all souls. I saw the invisible web that binds us all, how each action generates waves that affect many more people than we imagine. Every word, every act of love we give spreads like a radiant light, but every act of selfishness, of cruelty, generates a shadow that extends beyond what we can perceive in life. I saw the absolute truth. Life on earth is not the center of existence. It's just a part of a much broader journey. What we do here, how we treat others, the decisions we make, have an impact that goes far beyond this reality. Jesus looked at me kindly and spoke again. Now you understand what comes next. But it's not your time yet. I knew what it meant before he finished saying it. I had to return. But before I did, there was still something more I needed to see, because what was coming next was the most profound revelation of all. The weight of Jesus' words still resonated within my soul. It's not your time yet. I understood, but I couldn't help but feel an internal conflict. On one hand, the peace and clarity of everything I had experienced made me want to stay. On the other, I knew my story on earth was not yet over. Jesus gestured with his hand, and immediately the environment changed again. From that space filled with light and pure energy, now I found myself in a place that I cannot describe with earthly words. It was neither heaven nor hell, but it had an imposing presence, as if all possible realities converged within it. Around me, everything seemed to move and transform, as if existence itself were revealing its secrets before my eyes. It was then that I saw what Jesus wanted to show me. Millions of souls, all gathered in a single point of light, as if they were waiting for something transcendental. They were not human figures, but each radiated a unique energy. Some shone with an indescribable intensity, while others seemed more muted, almost dim. This is where each soul understands what it truly is, Jesus said with his deep and loving voice. This is the moment where all truth is revealed. It took me a second to grasp it, but when I did, I felt my consciousness expanding beyond any limits. What I was seeing was the judgment of the soul, but not as we imagine it on earth. There was no celestial court, no list of sins and virtues. There was no scale measuring our actions. The judgment was oneself, facing one's own life. Every soul revisits each and every one of its actions, but not from its own perspective, rather through the eyes of all those it has affected. In an instant, I understood what this meant. I saw a woman who, in life, had been generous and kind. I could feel as if I were her. The happiness and love she had shared with others. Every act of compassion she had in life filled her with light, causing her to vibrate with an energy so pure that she seemed to rise even higher. But I also saw a man who had lived selfishly, hurting others without considering the consequences. His experience was very different. Now he felt in his own soul every tear he had caused, every heart he had broken, every moment he could have chosen love but didn't. It was not a punishment. It was not a condemnation. It was the absolute truth revealing itself with a clarity that was impossible to ignore. Then I understood the great revelation. There is no judgment from a higher entity. Each soul faces the truth of its own existence. Each soul experiences the love or pain it generated in others. Jesus looked at me with an infinite tenderness, as if he understood every thought that passed through my mind. The purpose of life is not perfection, he said calmly. It is to learn, to love, to evolve. What you give to the world, you will receive back, not as a punishment, but as part of the path to the truth. In that moment, my mind was filled with memories of my own life. I saw every decision, every word, every thought. I felt the moments when I had given love and how that had illuminated others. But I also felt the moments when I had hurt unknowingly, the times when I let pride or indifference separate me from those who needed me. It was then that I saw it, the exact moment when my soul left my body. I observed it from another perspective, not just as a witness, but with a deeper understanding. I saw the instant when my consciousness detached from my physical body and the beings of light that had been around me. They were not there to judge me, but to accompany me in the process, to help me remember who I truly was. Jesus showed me that at that precise moment, when the soul leaves the body, everything else fades away. The worries, the fears, the possessions, nothing of that matters. The only thing that remains is the love we gave and the love we stopped giving. And in that moment, I knew I still had something more to do. Jesus extended his hand and looked at me with indescribable sweetness. It's time to go back. My heart filled with an indescribable feeling, a mix of gratitude and melancholy. I didn't want to leave this place. I didn't want to forget what I had learned. But something inside me told me that this was not the end. It was a new beginning. And then everything changed again. In the blink of an eye, I felt as if an invisible force were pulling me back. The light surrounding me began to fade, and that infinite peace started to transform into a feeling of being dragged. It was as if my soul were being taken back to its origin. There was no pain, but there was a resistance within me. I didn't want to go, not after having seen what I saw, not after feeling what I felt. Then I heard Jesus' voice, like a vibrant echo inside me. You will not forget everything you have seen. It will remain within you. Suddenly, I found myself falling, but not in the physical sense. It was a fall into consciousness, into perception, into time. Everything became a whirlwind of light and shadows, until I finally felt something I hadn't felt since I crossed over. Weight. It was a brutal impact. I felt the cold on my skin, the pressure in my chest, a prickling sensation in every part of me. Then the sound returned. It was no longer the celestial silence, nor the harmony of light. Now it was human voices, sobs, anguished whispers. I opened my eyes with effort. The ceiling of an unfamiliar room appeared before me, blurry and flickering. I blinked several times until I distinguished the cold, flickering lights of what I quickly recognized as a hospital room. Around me, the voices became clearer. He's awake, I heard someone say, with a mix of disbelief and relief. My lungs filled with a deep breath, as if I were inhaling for the first time in centuries. My chest burned. Every cell in my body ached, but I was alive. The doctors immediately approached. I felt cold hands checking my pulse, adjusting tubes and monitors around me. My mind was still caught between two worlds. The last thing I remembered was the exact moment my soul left my body, and now I was back. A nurse, still wide-eyed in amazement, gently took my hand. "We thought you wouldn't," she whispered. "You've been unconscious for days. Days." I thought to myself that time in that other place had been completely different. I couldn't tell if it had been minutes, hours, or an eternity. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, as if I hadn't used my voice in years. I could only nod. I couldn't ignore what I had just experienced, but I also couldn't put it into words. Not yet. Then I looked around and saw something that moved me deeply. My loved ones were there, familiar faces filled with worry and love. Their gazes reflected days of anguish and sleepless nights, waiting for me to wake up. One of them, with tears in their eyes, approached and took my hand. "We thought we had lost you." In that moment, I felt the immense responsibility of what I had lived. I knew that I hadn't returned by chance. Jesus had shown me what lies beyond, but he had also given me a message that I needed to share. What I saw on the other side was not a punishment, nor was it a terrifying judgment, but an absolute revelation. Every soul, sooner or later, will enter the truth of its existence. And now I knew that my mission was not just to remember it, but to convey it. The love and pain we create in others do not disappear. They stay with us, becoming part of our energy, of our essence. And when our time comes to cross that threshold, we will see, with complete clarity, everything we did in life, feeling it in every fiber of our being. It was impossible to continue living as before. I could no longer ignore the weight of every decision, of every action. But how could I explain it? How could I tell someone what I saw without them thinking it was just a delusion of my dying mind? I remained silent, observing the faces of those around me. They had been suffering for me, worried, praying. In that moment, I understood that the greatest gift I had now was not just the opportunity to live, but the opportunity to do it right. I took a deep breath. I was still weak, but I knew that over time, I would find the right words to tell my story. And when I did, it would change the lives of many people. In the blink of an eye, I felt as if an invisible force was pulling me back. The light surrounding me began to fade, and that infinite peace started to transform into a sense of being dragged. It was as if my soul were being taken back to its origin. There was no pain, but there was a resistance within me. I didn't want to go, not after seeing what I had seen, not after feeling what I had felt. Trust. I heard the voice of Jesus like a vibrant echo inside me. You will not forget all that you have seen. It will remain within you. Suddenly, I found myself falling, but not in a physical sense. It was a fall into consciousness, into perception, into time. Everything turned into a whirlwind of light and shadows, until I finally felt something I hadn't felt since I crossed to the other side. Weight. My soul was returning to my body. It was a brutal impact. I felt the cold on my skin, the pressure in my chest, a prickling sensation in every part of me. Then, sound returned. It was no longer the celestial silence or the harmony of the light. Now, there were human voices, sobs, anguished whispers. I opened my eyes with effort. The ceiling of an unfamiliar room appeared before me, blurry and flickering. I blinked several times until I could make out the cold, blinking lights of what I quickly recognized as a hospital room. Around me, the voices became clearer. He's awake, I heard someone say, with a mix of disbelief and relief. My lungs expanded with a deep breath, as if I were inhaling for the first time in centuries. My chest burned. Every cell in my body ached, but I was alive. The doctors rushed over. I felt cold hands checking my pulse, adjusting tubes and monitors around me. My mind was still trapped between two worlds. The last thing I remembered was the exact moment my soul left my body, and now I was back. A nurse, her eyes still filled with wonder, gently took my hand. We thought you wouldn't make it, she whispered. You've been unconscious for days. Days, I thought to myself. The time in that other place had been completely different. I couldn't tell if it was minutes, hours, or an eternity. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, as if I hadn't used my voice in years. I could only nod. My thoughts were scattered. I couldn't ignore what I had just experienced, but I also couldn't put it into words yet. Then I looked around and saw something that touched me deeply. My loved ones were there, familiar faces filled with concern. Their gazes reflected days of anguish, sleepless nights waiting for me to wake up. One of them, tears in their eyes, approached and took my hand. We thought we had lost you. In that moment, I felt the immense responsibility of what I had lived through. I knew I hadn't returned by chance. Jesus had shown me what lies beyond, but he had also given me a message to share. What I saw on the other side was not punishment. It was not a terrifying judgment, but an absolute revelation. Every soul, sooner or later, will face the truth of its existence. And I now knew that my mission was not just to remember it, but to convey it. The love and pain we generate in others do not disappear. They stay with us, becoming part of our energy, our essence. And when our moment comes to cross that threshold, we will see with total clarity all that we did in life, feeling it in every corner of our existence. It was impossible to keep living as before. I could no longer ignore the weight of every decision, every action. But how could I explain it? How could I tell someone what I saw without them thinking it was just a delusion from my dying mind? I remained silent, observing the faces of those around me. They had been suffering for me, worried, praying. In that moment, I understood that the greatest gift I had now was not just the opportunity to live, but the chance to do it right. I took a deep breath. I was still weak, but I knew that, with time, I would find the right words to tell my story. And when I did, it would change many people's lives. The days that followed my awakening were strange. My body was present, but my mind still floated between two worlds. I had seen what lies beyond death, and I knew with absolute certainty that life does not end when the heart stops beating. Questions flooded my mind. Why did I come back? What was my purpose now? How could I share what I saw without being thought of as crazy? The hospital became a place of reflection. While my body healed, my spirit tried to process the enormity of what I had experienced. I could not ignore the truth that was revealed to me. All souls, without exception, will experience that moment, that instant when all that has been lived is laid before our eyes, and without filters or excuses, we will see who we truly were. But the most terrifying part was not the judgment, but the clarity. There, in that other realm, there are no deceptions or self-justifications. We feel every emotion we provoked in others, every joy and every hurt. There are no external punishments because the true judgment is internal. We face our own truth, and that is what defines us. I understood that my return was no accident. I had to tell this story. I had to make more people understand that life is so much more than what we see. The day I was discharged, everything looked different. The sunlight, the sound of the wind, the gazes of people on the street. Nothing was the same. As my family took me back home, I observed the world with new eyes. I saw the weight of suffering on the faces of some, the pointless rush in others, but I also saw glimmers of light in those who still had hope. Now I knew that our choices not only determine our life here, but also our existence beyond. That night, as I lay in bed after so long, I closed my eyes and remembered the voice of Jesus. Love is the key. Live with love, and when the time comes, you will not be afraid. Then I knew I hadn't come back. This message. I don't know who needs to hear this today. Maybe it's you. Maybe this message reached you because there's something within you that has always felt that life is more than what we've been told. If you're here, there's a reason. If this testimony resonated with you, share it. Maybe someone else needs it. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more stories like this. And now, tell me, what do you think of all this? I'll read you in the comments, and before you go, click on the video you see on the screen because this is just the beginning.